Well, I have the great delight to talk about Norman Wirzba's keynote address that started the conference off. My name is Erin VanLaningham. For those of you who don't know me, I am the Director of Project Development for NetVUE, directing the Scholarly Resources Project, co-hosting the podcast, and working on the book review section for our new journal. So if you have questions about that, feel free to reach out to me at any time, really. But I want to talk about Norm's really inspiring and grounding and important framing for the conference. As David mentioned, the title was Vocatio, Call to Transformative Encounter. And I've just pulled forward three of his sort of main points from the first portion of the uh, speech. And the first one is really about identity and vocation, lessons from the Garden of Eden. So Norm used the Garden of Eden as a place that we can kind of go to understand some important tenets about what it means to encounter our world. It's really talking about this in terms of place, our campuses, our communities, and what we do to encourage each other and what we do to encourage students to encounter the world and each other in our vocations. So the first thing really, the lesson from the Garden of Eden is that we need the ground. Well, what does Norm mean by that? He said we need the ground because we are needy and none of us exist alone. And drawing from the creation story, we are soil animated by divine breath. And so, this idea that we're needy and that we need the ground is the first thing that we can kind of take as part of our vocational identities. Second, gardening is not a punishment. This is a really, this was great news. He got some good laughs from that, even though not everybody maybe agrees with that. But the idea that really, when we learn to tend a garden, tend to our environments, this helps us learn who we are, what the world around us might need or be able to provide for us, and understand our relationship with the gardener, the divine creator, God, and teaching us about pruning and watering that garden. He gave lots of really great examples about how we can learn about the garden. He talked a lot about instead of looking at, sort of pictures of a garden, to really be in the garden or to encounter it, to be in a place. He pushed on the concept of depth in our encounters. And that brought us to the idea of the sensuous intelligence, engaging by touch, smell, and taste. And he had lots of lovely stories about strawberries and pizza and apple pie and things like that. And I encourage you to read his books if you want more from that, or listen to the podcast interview that we did on Callings a few seasons ago. If you can advance the slide, Rachel. The second part of Norm's talk then really, and if you can click to the, he had several other really excellent points. I love this language of learning to linger. He says we all have a linger deficit disorder. I think this is great, especially at this time of year for all of us to remember. And, the way that we kind of get around that is the next bullet points that I have there. Talked a lot about resonance. So sort of how are we resonating with being in the world, our frantic ways, maybe get in the way of that, knowing more, being faster. That kind of is part of the problem of learning to linger. And he says that we can kind of gain resonance both through physiological encounters, so back to the sensuous intelligence ideas, and the world that meets us. He says we need to be hospitable to the world. Hospitality is reciprocal. And, as we teach students, work with our colleagues on our campuses, he talked about, he kind of challenged us to think, are you a tourist or are you a pilgrim? Are you, giving sights or are you going to sites? And I think that's really helpful language as we think about our vocational identities and how to really, encounter the world with depth and engagement. Finally, he reminded us of the importance of the Sabbath. And, when queried about this in the question and answer part, I think his most important point about the Sabbath, this ritual of Sabbath, is that the barriers to practicing the Sabbath are high, and that this is not an individual pursuit. So this is something that we need to help each other do, that we need to create systems of support to do, so that this isn't just, for a privileged few, but that this is really a communal endeavor. Finally, he closed by asking this question: how can education create rituals for transformative encounter? There's so much more I can say about the keynote. I'll end there. I do want to point out that there's a picture of Norm's most recent book, and that is going to be the big read for next year. And so Norm's talk really sets the stage for engaging all of these topics throughout the next academic year through the big read.